What if I told you that God has chosen you, right now, for something incredible? You might doubt it, or think it's too good to be true. But I promise you this, it's no accident that you're watching this video right now. Something is about to change in your life, and it all begins with one simple yet profound question: has God really chosen me? You might wonder why some people seem to walk with clear purpose while you feel lost, waiting for a divine answer. But I need you to understand something crucial. God doesn't choose by chance. He sees something in you that you might not even recognize yet. There's a divine promise reserved for your life, and it's closer than you think. I know what it feels like to be in a place of uncertainty, where it seems like God's promises are for everyone else but you. But I'm here to tell you, from the depths of my heart, God has not forgotten you. He chose you because there's something in you He wants to reveal to the world. Maybe you've gotten lost in the midst of challenges, but what you're about to hear will transform your perspective on God's purpose for your life. What you're about to hear is not just a simple calling. It's about the greater purpose God has designed for you. You're about to understand something that you couldn't see before, why God has never given up on you, and why He has something truly special planned for your journey. Stay with me. The next step will be the revelation you've been waiting for. God has not forgotten you, and this is the truth that will change everything. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below with your city or country. And if you believe you're ready to receive God's blessings, drop the number 7 in the comments, symbolizing prosperity and blessings. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could also be blessed. Let's map together where the fire of the Spirit is reaching and bringing prosperity. Being chosen by God is not just a random event. It's not a lottery where we're picked for a mission without reason. God chooses us with a specific purpose, and His choice comes with a promise that He will be with us no matter where He leads. When I think of Abraham, I'm struck by the magnitude of his response to God's call. Abraham was told to leave his land, his family, everything he knew, and go to a place that he didn't even know. God promised him, "I will make you into a great nation," Genesis 12:2. But for that promise to come to pass, Abraham had to trust even when he couldn't see the way. God chose him, and though the path was unclear, Abraham trusted in God's promises. This is the first step, to understand that being chosen by God means He sees something in us that we might not even see in ourselves. He doesn't choose us because of our perfection or accomplishments, but because He has a divine plan for our lives. But that doesn't mean the journey will be easy. When God calls us, He calls us to something bigger than ourselves. And often, that calling comes with challenges, as it did for Abraham. When God chooses, He doesn't just call us, He makes promises. God's promises act as anchors that hold us steady in times of difficulty. After calling Abraham, God made a clear, unshakable promise He would be the father of a great nation, even though Abraham was old and his wife, Sarah, was barren. Abraham's challenge was to believe in God's promise, even when everything around him seemed to contradict it. I think of Moses, who was chosen by God to free the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. Moses was given the promise that God would be with him and that he would be the instrument of the people's deliverance. But Moses faced tremendous obstacles, including his own lack of faith and fear that he wasn't capable of fulfilling the task. When God called him, Moses felt completely inadequate for the job. But God reminded him that He would be with him every step of the way and that God's promises are always stronger than any challenge. God doesn't choose us because we're capable. He chooses us because He is capable of fulfilling everything He has promised. The challenge of trusting in God's promises is real, especially when we face difficulties, but it's in those times that He teaches us to rely completely on Him. God doesn't choose the most powerful or the wisest people in the world to fulfill His purposes. Instead, He chooses ordinary people, often with evident flaws, but who are willing to listen to His voice and trust in His plan. David is a perfect example. When the prophet Samuel went to Jesse's house to anoint a new king, all of David's older, stronger brothers seemed like the obvious choice. But God didn't look at their outward appearance. He chose David, the youngest and seemingly least significant, because the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16-7. David faced huge challenges, from fighting Goliath to fleeing from King Saul's rage, but God was always with him, fulfilling his promises, even when the circumstances seemed impossible. God chooses people like you and me, people with flaws and fears, to fulfill his extraordinary purposes. He chooses us not because we're strong, but because he can display his strength in our weakness. When God chooses us, it doesn't mean everything will be easy. In fact, God often chooses those who are most vulnerable because through them he glorifies his name. The journey of faith is marked by challenges, but it is also filled with divine promises that will never fail. Prayer is one of the most powerful ways we can align ourselves with God's promises. When David Yonggi Choo spoke about the importance of prayer, he wasn't talking about a surface-level practice. He was talking about a type of prayer that moves mountains, a prayer that doesn't just ask for blessings but pleads for God's promises to be fulfilled in our lives. Choo believed that prayer wasn't just about our spiritual life, it's the way we access God's promises. I think of Hannah, who fervently prayed for a son, knowing that only God could fulfill that promise. Her prayer wasn't a simple request, it was a commitment to give back to God whatever he gave her. And God heard her prayer, fulfilling his promise that she would have a son, and Samuel became a great prophet. God doesn't just make promises, he also calls us to pray and believe in them. When we pray, we are actively participating in the fulfillment of God's promises. No matter how long the desert seems to last, our prayers are opening doors for God's promises to unfold in our lives. Just as he did for the great heroes of faith, he will do for us. The response God expects from us when he chooses us is faith. Faith isn't a passive acceptance of his promises, it's an active, moving faith. When God called Joshua to lead Israel into the Promised Land, he made grand promises, but he also put Joshua to the test. God told him to be strong and courageous, Joshua 1-9, knowing that the challenges would be enormous. Joshua's faith wasn't just about believing that the land was good. It was about acting in obedience, even when the path was unclear. Similarly, when God chooses us, he doesn't choose us to sit back and wait. He calls us to act in faith, even when we don't see the way forward. This faith doesn't come from our own strength, it comes from the Holy Spirit, who empowers us to live boldly. Will you respond to God's call with faith? Will you take that first step, trusting that he will carry you through? I believe that when God calls us, it's not always an audible voice or a dramatic experience. Sometimes it's a quiet whisper in our hearts, a gentle tug that tells us it's time. It's a sense of urgency, a stirring in our spirit that won't go away, no matter how much we try to ignore it. But how do we know when it's truly God calling and not just our own desires or anxieties? The key is recognizing that God's calling aligns with his word. Every call from God is consistent with his character, and it will always be rooted in love, purpose, and his ultimate plan for your life. Think of the moment when Samuel was called by God in the night. Samuel didn't recognize the voice at first, but once he realized it was God, he responded, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening." That's the posture of a heart ready to hear from God. It's a heart that is open, willing, and humble. If you're feeling a pull, a deep longing that you can't explain, it might be God preparing you for something greater. Perhaps you're feeling an unease in your spirit, a sense that something is changing, that something divine is about to happen. The key to recognizing God's call is being still enough to listen, paying attention to the quiet moments and the gentle nudges that often go unnoticed. Are you listening? God doesn't always shout, but he speaks clearly to those who are willing to hear. How can you tune your heart to hear him today? There's something deeply profound about the moment you're in right now. I feel it as I write these words, and I sense you feel it too. This is no coincidence. You didn't just happen to stumble upon this video. God has placed it in front of you at this exact moment for a reason. There's a time in everyone's life when God presents a kairos moment, a divinely appointed time. In the Bible, God always spoke to his people at specific moments in history, times when they needed to make a decision to choose whether to step into their destiny or turn away. I believe October 15th is one of those moments. It's not just a date. It's a spiritual deadline, a window of opportunity for you to respond. Just like the Israelites had to be ready to leave Egypt, you must be ready to step into what God has for you. The window is open, but it may not be open forever. Will you answer the call now? When God makes a promise, he always fulfills it. But that doesn't mean the journey will be easy. God often chooses imperfect people to do extraordinary things, but he also allows those people to face challenges. Joseph's life is a perfect example of this. God gave him grand dreams, but he was betrayed by his own brothers, sold as a slave, and thrown into prison. Everything seemed to go against God's promises, but Joseph kept his faith. He knew that God was faithful, and in time the promises came to pass. When God chooses us and makes promises, he doesn't promise an easy life. Instead, he promises to be with us in every difficulty. His promises are never nullified by circumstances. In fact, it's through struggle that God strengthens and prepares us for what's ahead. Trusting in God's promises means trusting even when the road seems dark. Throughout the journey of faith, doubt can creep in. We often look at our lives and wonder if we're truly capable of fulfilling God's call. When God chose Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, he doubted himself and even questioned God multiple times. But in the end, when he saw the Red Sea part and the people pass through safely, he witnessed God's faithfulness firsthand. Moses fulfilled his call, despite immense challenges, and saw God's promises come to life. I believe the Christian journey is much the same. God doesn't call us to fail. He chooses us because he has a perfect plan for our lives, and he equips us to fulfill that plan. The path may be full of tests and trials, but when we look back, we'll see how faithful God was every step of the way, fulfilling his promises. To fulfill God's call is to live for him and to experience the promises realized in his perfect timing. Now that you've heard all of this, the question is, what will you do with it? God has something incredible reserved for your life, and maybe, just maybe, you've finally reached the moment where you'll take the next step. God's call isn't for tomorrow, it's for now. It doesn't matter where you are or what you've been through. He chose you, and his promise to you is real. I want you to think about what you've just heard, what resonated in your heart. Maybe something touched your soul in a way you can't explain, as if God himself was whispering, "It's your turn." I invite you to reflect on this because this choice isn't just for others, it's for you. God has something unique prepared, and the decision to answer that call is yours. I know it can be difficult to believe in God's promises when everything seems uncertain. But don't be mistaken. The fact that you're here, watching this right now, is no coincidence. God is saying something to you, and I challenge you not to let it pass you by. If this message touched your heart in any way, share in the comments what God has been putting on your heart. What do you feel he's calling you to do now? You are not alone on this journey, and this is where we begin to walk together. Let's support one another, pray for each other, and move forward, knowing that God never fails to fulfill his promises. Believe this, God has not forgotten you, and now it's your turn to take that step. Comment below and share your response. I want to know what's in your heart because together we'll live the purpose he has prepared for us.